Your privilege of the floor, so your role.
Which one is that? Is that on? Yep. All right. Privilege of the floor, Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Vice President, privilege of the floor. Thank you. Fellow senators, please join me in welcoming Steve Lupien from the University of Wyoming, who his wife Caitlin and himself were part of our original suite of blockchain laws that helped us get through it and was part of the committee. And with him is Monty Burton, CEO of Halcyon Energy. And they're going to talk a bit about a project they're kind of working on, maybe trying to bring to Wyoming concerning hydrogen and some of the resources in our blockchain laws. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll be very, very brief. Most of you know me from working on the blockchain legislation. But one of the advantages of what you've done in this body with the blockchain legislation, and it was all about how do we bring jobs, how do we bring opportunities. Certainly as a professor at the University of Wyoming, it's about how do we create opportunities within Wyoming for our graduates. And what you may not have realized when you were passing the blockchain legislation is the ripple effect it's going to have in other industries. So I'd like to introduce Monty Burton, who is the president and CEO of Halcyon. Halcyon is working with the University of Wyoming right now, primarily our engineering department, to develop a proof of concept on a hydrogen production facility that's going to radically change the amount of hydrogen available in the world. And they are looking to work directly with the University of Wyoming. They're looking to utilize our graduates. Speaking particularly about blockchain, their business model includes we're going to use blockchain to track the white hydrogen that they're going to produce. We're going to use excess power to mine Bitcoin, and we are also going to be able to create NFTs around ESG environmental tokens for this project as well too. And all of this was possible because of what you've been doing since 2017. So really the thanks go to you. But with that, I'd like to introduce Monty Burton and let him just take a couple of minutes and explain the hydrogen project.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Ogden, for allowing me to come before y'all. I appreciate each and every one of you. And thank y'all very much for the laws that you have passed, because what y'all have put together is basically, as I was telling Ms. Ellis, is that we're truly in a paradigm shift of two different industries, currency and energy. Halcyon Energy is a company that was formed in 2015. We were originally focused on liquefied natural gas, moving it both domestically in the Caribbean. We also worked very extensively with the Opportunity Zone program. Senator Tim Scott, myself, along with Aiken Gump law firm, we created the world's first hybrid private equity fund system that we patented, which as we speak right now makes up a large part of the Opportunity Zone program and how it works. From there, we were asked by President Trump to help put this together. As everything rolled forward, the pandemic hit, I got called by Senator Tim Scott. Senator Tim Scott says, we have a very big problem. We need you to start producing medical PPE because we do not do it. In Honduras, my wife's family, we are the largest company in Central America. We produce everything from t-shirts for Nike to Under Armour to you name it. We immediately switched to operations. We began producing 3,000 pieces of medical PPE per day, mask, gowns, sheets, you name it, we were producing it. And then along the way, we also got asked, hey, if the election doesn't go the way that we hope that it goes, that a large amount of our LNG producers in the United States are going to we will be entering back into the Paris Climate Agreement, which will greatly affect the LNG producers in the United States. They will need to be able to produce hydrogen. We have someone that we would like to introduce you to that has a great technology, but the biggest problem they have is the location. The location to produce this in is in Honduras. They know they cannot go through the Honduran government because it's very difficult to go through the Honduran government, but we know your situation and what you have down there, and that your family down there is the largest employers in Honduras, and we don't have to go through all the red tape because all we're doing is expanding the company. So we were introduced to hydrogen, and along the way, through that process, we began looking at putting it together and developing it. I got contacted by a gentleman that was very well aware of all the crypto miners getting kicked out of China, and contacted me and said, "Hey, this may be a great opportunity. Y'all have the largest free trade zone in Central America. You're also producing clean hydrogen and green energy. It's going to be a big impact on the world, and they are our #1 strategic partner in Latin America." So I started getting calls from crypto miners. They started offering us very large contracts. I knew nothing about it. I make a joke because they asked me, what did I know about crypto mining? I said, I seen Elon Musk on Saturday Night Live, and that was it. I reached out to my chief investment officer, David Harris, who's in the top, told him they were offering us $5 to $10 million contracts, and I did not want to take this before the board until I understood something about it. He said, I got two very good friends that I've known for a number of years in Connecticut who are now living in Wyoming. Let me give them a call. The next thing you know, we're now involved with the University of Wyoming. We're working in developing and improving our technology, and every aspect of everything of those two different transitional periods that we're going with the paradigm shifts, all of those have been made possible for clean energy and crypto mining and blockchain have been passed right here. Because every super major in the world is asking to buy our hydrogen, but they also ask the same exact question, where are you going to get the qualified people to be able to do this? There's no hydrogen people, there's no blockchain, because hydrogen will be traded through the use of blockchain. And so I have a very clear answer for them. All of our employees are going to be coming from the University of Wyoming. They already know all about it. One of the largest off-takers that wants the largest amount of our hydrogen is Williams, who they're already partnered with the University of Wyoming. So it's literally created the perfect storm. And I have to say thanks to each and every one of you, because without y'all passing the regulations and laws for blockchain, working to create forward the hydrogen movement here in Wyoming, it literally would not be possible for what we're doing. And we're being billed right now as the next, comparing us as the Exxon to hydrogen, because we can, through our technology, through sunlight and water, we can produce the largest amounts of hydrogen in the world. And the other products that we're able to produce is 100% clean drinking water, which I also know everybody in the world needs. And also, too, for the farming communities, there's no one out there that can produce as much clean ammonia as we can. And it's a dollar amounts that we can't either. So literally, Wyoming is the epicenter for everything that's going to benefit the world. And everyone knows that. So I applaud y'all. I thank y'all. I appreciate y'all. Y'all all pat each other on the back for what y'all are doing, because without y'all's foresight and being able to truly see what the future holds, it truly would not give us the opportunity that we have today. So thank y'all very much. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Ogden and Steve, to be able to speak before y'all. I look forward to answering any questions. We are moving our offices here from Houston. We are going to be here in Cheyenne. We are going to have offices in Laramie. And I truly look forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Here, here. Senator Salazar,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Point of privilege, if I may.
you may.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I have some friends visiting the Capitol for the first time. Up here in the north, David and Marta Mossberg with their children Hank, Charlie, and Elsa, if you could welcome them to the Senate. Thank you.
messages from the House. Nope. Yeah, here we go. Hold on there a second. Senator Anderson,
Mr. Vice President, privilege of the floor.
floor is yours.
Thank you. Senators, the House member, in fact, the minority floor leader, has ordered a lot of these royal blue cups and is selling them for $5 each. They're available in Majority Secretary Pam Landry's office, room 225 on the south side of the House. They're a nice gift for whoever you need a gift for. Thank you.
All right, signing of messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, March 9, 2022, message number 258. Mr. President, the following files passed the House on third reading in an amended form, and the House respectfully asks the Senate to concur by adopting amendments. Message number 258, Senate File 8, Weed and Pest Reorganization. Ayes 57, noes 1, excused 2. Message number 259, Senate File 11, Display of State Flag. Ayes 58, excused 2. Message number 260, Senate File 41, Expanding Next Generation 911. Ayes 48, noes 10, excused 2. Message number 265, Senate File 80, Omnibus Water Bill Construction. Ayes 52, noes 6, excused 2. Message number 267, Senate File 101, Epinephrine and Naloxone Administration Authority. Ayes 56, noes 2, excused 2. Message number 257, Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third reading. Senate File number 3, Radioactive Materials Transport Fee. Ayes 48, noes 10, excused 2. Message number 261, Senate File number 43, Community College District Elections. Ayes 56, noes 2, excused 2. Message number 262, Senate File number 53, Local Government Liability Pool Amendments. Ayes 57, noes 1, excused 2. Message number 263, Senate File number 73, Codifying the Institutional Land Fund. Ayes 58, excused 2. Message number 264, Senate File number 77, Name Change, Duration of Residency Requirement. Ayes 55, noes 3, excused 2. Message number 266. Mr. President, the following bill failed to pass the House third reading. Senate File number 80, Clarification of Existing State Ownership of Groundwater. Ayes 26, noes 32, excused 2. Message number 268, Conferees appointed. Mr. President, the House appointed House conferees to meet with a like Committee number 1 from the Senate on amendments to Senate File 47. House conferees are Representative Burkhart, Chairman, Representative Roscoe, and Representative Stiff. Signed, Wendy Harding, House Chief Clerk.
Signing of enrolled acts. Enrolled Act number 21. Oh. Yeah. There we go. We're at that order of business signing, excuse me, signing of enrolled act. Reading clerk, will you read in the enrolled act?
Senate Enrolled Act number 29, being original Senate File 27, an act relating to counties.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 29, original Senate File 27. I've signed. Reading clerk, Senate Enrolled Act Number 30, read that in.
Senate Enrolled Act number 30, being original Senate File 38, an act relating to ad valorem taxation of mineral production.
I'm about to sign Senate File 30, I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 30, original Senate File 38. I have so signed. Reading clerk.
Senate Enrolled Act number 31, being original Senate File 77, an act relating to petitions for name changes.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 31, the original Senate File 77. I have so signed.
Senate Enrolled Act number 32, being original Senate File 73, an act relating to public funds.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 32, original Senate File 73. I have so signed.
Senate Enrolled Act number 33, being original Senate File 53, an act relating to the local government insurance program.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 33, Senate File 53. I have so signed.
Senate Enrolled Act number 34, being original Senate File 43, an act relating to community college district elections.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 34, original Senate File 43. So signed.
Senate Enrolled Act number 35, being original Senate File 3, an act relating to commercial vehicle fees.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act 35, the original Senate File 3. I have so signed. Next order of business. Senator Perkins.
Yes, Mr. Vice President? Did you want me to go through the goldenrod a little bit?
Would you do that, Mr. Chairman?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you do have a goldenrod that's been passed out. It should say 3/9/2022 goldenrod, and just to bring you up to speed a little bit on where we're at and as things have moved through. So again, the first page is a summary of most of the succeeding pages. Just a couple things that I just thought I might point out because we've talked about it the last few days. If you go to, on page 1, if you go to line 23 and see that $113,185,000 there, remember that's what we call the stabilization reserve account, and that's, you'll see it in two different numbers, and that's because it's basically a 5% estimate of what we anticipate the appropriated expenditures are, and it's a cash flow item to make sure that we've got that much, at least in the budget reserve account as we begin each year. And that's 113, you saw that come up in discussion yesterday. That's what that 113 is we're talking about. We always put it in the budget at just 5%. Again, like I say, it's kind of cash flow. If you'll notice going down to the next one on lines 25 through 29, where we talk about the legislation, the LSRA, you see the balance is now back up to $1,560,000,000, which is kind of what we saw when the first day we came down here. And you see down below now that balance is back up above 1,530,000,000. The difference in why that came back up is House action on a water bill that we sent down there on the Senate file that had 75 million in it, and they cut 50 out and left 25 in it. And that's the result of that, is that's now reflected in the goldenrod, and that's what accounts for that difference going back up. So just a couple of the things, if you'll turn to page 2 with me, that's the general fund and what we've been doing there. Just a couple things I would point out on that, just so you kind of understand. So when you look on the, on column P and column X, if you notice, we're also now down to 2 columns. This is just what as of the budget that was approved and hasn't been signed by the governor yet, but has been approved by both houses. That's what the JCC 01 status is. So, and what you're seeing there under column P, which is the biennial years 21, 22, you look down there, you see things that were passed in the 2020 budget bill, the 2021 budget bill, and some other things in 2021. You'll see those in column P. And then when you get down to stuff that's in the 2022 budget session, including the 2022 budget bill, the reason they're in that column is because those are things that were either made effective immediately or they were reversions. And so that's why those numbers appear in those columns. And so you see down, if you go down below, begin on lines 38, you'll see there's House Bill 5, the Wild Horse Management, Borough Management. That was a $500,000 effective immediately. That's why it's in that column instead of the column on the right, instead of column X. See the juvenile data reporting is an example. That was one, that 701, that's for the next biennium. That's not anticipated, not authorized to be expended until after beginning July 1 of this coming year. So that's why it's in column right. And so that's why some of those are in one column and in another. Obviously, the big one is you see Senate File 39, which now has been signed, I understand, by the governor. You see the $55 million, which is the state portion of that was effective immediately. That's what appears in that column. So that's, you'll see that anyway, those are the differences there. If we go into the page 3 on the, looking at the budget reserve account, you see that kind of gets zeroed out, and except for the part that goes to the statutory reserve account, the $113 million we talked about a little bit earlier. But you see a little bit different here. If you look on line 10, you'll see that's where HB 105 was. That's the severance tax COLE reduction that we talked about today. That's still on there, and you can see the effect of that. Since that's a reduction in revenue out of that reserve account, that's where you see it there. That's why it's a reducing revenue instead of appropriating and expending it. So that's why it's appearing above the line there. So you see the reduction in revenues of $12.2 million there is the estimated price tag on that for the biennium in reduced revenue. Moving on down, you see a couple things. If you go down to line 38 and see appropriations and transfers, that 2020 budget session, that 127,830, that's still the remainders of the 105 local government spending bill from 2020, 2 years ago, that was there. They're still waiting for that to be resolved. There is, however, about 10 million of that will come back to us. We talked about this a little bit in the budget. There's 10 million in there that comes back to us. The other part of that, over and above the local, mostly that over and above the local, the 105 in local government spending, is the $10 million emergency appropriation make to the governor every biennium. We did it again this year. It wasn't used last year, so it'll come back in. So that'll actually, when the biennium gets here, assuming that there hasn't been an emergency, it hasn't been spent, there's $10 more million that will dribble into the bottom of the LSRA number. Again, going down there, if you go to the biggest change on there, if you go to line 49, that's Senate File 82. We talked about that just a minute ago. That's a supplemental water development funding bill that had some of the dam, DAM repairs on there, and so that they're left 25 million. I tried to figure out what that was for. I thought that might be 25 million for the matching on LaPrel, but it's not clear in the actions that the House has taken yet. The governor had applied even before he came down there for a grant for the federal portion to fix LaPrel Dam. It required, I think it's a 4-to-1 match. And so as that goes through, it's going to be something for us to keep our eye on to make sure whatever comes out of that, the governor needs to have some matching money to deal with LaPrel if the federal grant comes through. But that's something we have to keep our eye on that ball. They changed that significantly, and that's, like I say, that 50 million is why the LSRA has jumped from, 50 million more. So before it was, if you remember, just earlier this week, we were looking at this was 1.477, I think, and 479, and so now it's 152, and the difference is that 50 million. So with that, and also, one other thing that I just bring to your attention, when you look at the LSRA anticipated balance for the end of the biennium, keep in mind that out of this also, if we hadn't put $225 million in permanent savings, this thing would be $225 million higher than that. The other thing, and that also would just mention that one of the things that we'll also see, keep your eye on, because you won't know what the LSRA really is until about the end of July, after the end of the year. If we stay at $90 to $100 oil, and depending on what happens in the investment funds, there could easily be another 200 million that's there, but you never know what happens with that. But trending there over and above what Craig initially estimated in January, there could be another 200 million there, or if something else bad happens, there could be a few hundred million less. You just never know. With that, if you want to go to this is more than you ever wanted to know about the goldenrod, Mr. Vice President. Just a couple other things to go there. You might have noticed we've talked a lot about the school deficit in the last few days. If you go to line 16, under the school foundation program, line 16 basically shows what the quote structural deficit is. It's now is for this biennium, it's anticipated to be $127 million. If you look at column X6 right now, again, with higher oil, and it doesn't take, that's with the Craig estimate now. Could be higher, could be lower. We'll see what happens. That also takes into the fact that the budget compromise of one-third that we did on severance taxes and federal minimum royalties, and the 60-40 we did, and the other one takes all that into consideration. So you can see that that's what that number is anticipated to be for the current biennium. And just to mention a couple things, I was talking to one of our budget fiscal about this, and they said, we talk about if oil's higher, but he said, in July of 2008, that the WTI was selling at just topped $140 a barrel. 6 months later, it was under $50 a barrel. You just never know. And with that, I think the only thing I'd mention to you also, if you want to go to page 5, again, continuing with my blathering on about goldenrod, just a couple of things you might bring to mind. So these are you see that we talked a little bit about them yesterday. Here's the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Spending Policy Reserve Account, the Common School, the SPLF, which is the Common School Permanent Spending Policy Reserve Account. Those are the reserve accounts that are outside the corpus. This is where we allow certain amounts to come in there before they tip. Right now, those are at 150% of what the estimated spending policy is in any given year. Just so what you see right now, that we're anticipating at the end of this current biennium on line 26, the PMTF spending policy reserve account will have $318 million in it, and then you see that there's a drain on it of $133 million and change. We'll call it $134 million. The reason that drops so much, even in the times that we have, is the only thing that we do as we look forward is we look at the anticipated earnings and dividends. We don't ever look at capital gains going forward, and that's one of the reasons for those reserve accounts is, so if we had nothing other than just the anticipated just interest and dividends that came from our investments over the next 2 years, that would be used, and so that's how it hits the profile there. It looked the same. It looked very same on the last 2 years ago, and of course we've had pretty good 2 years in the investment markets until just recently. But that's why that number drops like that, because that's how we profile it, and that's one of the reasons why several years ago we increased those reserve accounts to up to 150%, so we would be able to know and budget for at least the next biennium and know what our obligations really would be with respect to these types of funds. Same thing there in the Common School Permanent on line the Common School Permanent Land Fund. If you go to line 44, the same thing. You have a drawdown there. It's the same thing. That anticipates no no other gains or earnings of any sort other than interest and dividends, which have been profiled at, I think, 2.5% for the coming biennium, and interest rates are already higher than that, in large part thanks to inflation. So the other thing I would mention about those two is that on 44, that has pretty much reached, it's just full. If there's much of gains or anything that comes into that before the end of the year, there'll be a tip into the corpus from that fund. The other one above that, going back to the permanent trust fund, that corpus at 318, the full amount of that is about 550. So it could potentially tip. It just depends what kind of capital gains and things are deposited into that trust fund, into that reserve account at the end of the year. It could tip there too, but we'll have to wait and see about that. Other than that, the only other thing I would add is if you go to the bottom on line 62 on page 5, you'll see that's the current accounting for the ARPA funds. You'll see that this legislature has spent everything but $26,613,000 of it. Now, it's possible this could all change. The governor hasn't got his red pen out yet and marked out. He's got line item veto in the budget bill and in the Capcom bill and in the ARPA bill. We'll see what he does with that, but so those things could change there. But that's kind of, you can go home and now use that to say that's what you did during your legislative vacation this year. Thank you. Stand for questions. It's RNE.
Any questions? No questions. The Senate will stand at ease until the sound of the gavel.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'd like to introduce one of the county commissioners from Sweetwater County, Randy Wendling. Give him a big welcome to the legislative body.
Senate will come back to order. We're going to take care of some concurrences here, keep the flow going. I have a note here, folks, for a reminder. Today and tomorrow, Secretary of State's office reminding you that there will be a presentation on election integrity down at the Capitol Auditorium. That's down at the end of the breezeway. And, well, saying that it's there if you want it. 4:30 is what I have here today and tomorrow. Secretary of State's office sponsoring it. Okay, Senator Hicks, are you ready with message number 265?
Mr. President, I move for concurrence on message.
Yeah, wait, let me get it ready and just seeing if you're good. Read it
I'm
in,
pretty
please.
anxious, Mr. Chairman.
Message number 265, referencing Senate File 80, Omnibus Water Bill Construction.
Senator Hicks.
Me? Okay, here we go. Mr. President, I move for concurrence on message number 265, original Senate File 80, Omnibus Water Bill Construction. The only change that the House did down in there, just because of since the time that we sent out here, that fuel prices have escalated substantially. They put another $5 million into their contingency fund. That's all they did. I would ask for your vote of concurrence. Vote aye.
Okay. Motion is the Senate do concur on Senate File 80, it's message number 265. Chief Clerk, please call the roll. And that concurrence is to vote aye.
Concurrence vote, Senate File 80, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Case? Aye. Aye. Cooper? Aye. Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Aye. Ellis? No. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks?
Aye.
Aye. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinski? Aye. Aye. Cole? Aye. Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstetter?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote? Hutchings, no to aye. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 80, 24 aye, 6 no.
By your vote, you concurred with the House amendments on Senate File 80. Senator Cost, are you ready with message 260? Go ahead, Senator Cost, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. President, I am. I move for concurrence. Okay, read it.
Read it in.
Message number 260, referencing Senate File 41, expanding Next Generation 911.
Thank you. Now, Senator Cost, apologize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for concurrence on message number 260 for Senate File 41, expanding Next Generation 911. Ladies and gentlemen, what they did down there is they changed the effective date from July 1st, 2022 to immediately on completion of all the acts necessary for the bill. This is a great move because then it allows that group to start applying for federal grants and all immediately rather than having to wait until July. So I would ask for your aye vote on this.
Okay. Motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 41 and vote aye. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote on Senate File 41. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? I, Furphy. I, Guru. I, Hicks. I, Hutchings. I, James. I, Kinski. I, Cole. I, Cost. I, Landon. I, McEwen. I, Nethercott. I, Pappas. I, Perkins. I, Rothfuss. I, Salazar. I, Schuler. I, Scott. I, Steinmetz. I, Wasserberger. I, President Dockstader. Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 41, 29 aye, 1 no.
By your vote, you concurred with House amendments on Senate File 41. Senate File 11, Senator Anderson, you ready?
Yes, Mr. President.
Read it in.
Message number 259, referencing Senate File 11, display of state flag.
Okay, Senator Anderson.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we pass message number 259 on Senate File 11 and ask for your aye vote. All they did was change, they struck and then and inserted at that time, which did help the language a little bit. And then the other thing, and I had asked for both of these in their committee, on line 2, they corrected the spelling. It's a little confusing because this lady that designed the flag had 2 last names that sounded a lot the same, Keys and Keys, but one was her married name, one was her maiden name, and we corrected where it was her married name. So that's all they did. It's perfectly good and sound, and I'd ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. The motion is the Senate do concur on Senate File 11. Chief Clerk, and vote aye. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 40. Oops,
Senate File 11.
I apologize.
Senate File 11.
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 11, display of state flag. Roll call, Anderson.
Aye.
Aye, Baldwin. Aye, Beitman. Aye, Boner. Aye, Bouchard. Aye, Case. Aye, Cooper. Aye, Driscoll. Aye, Ellis. Aye, French. Aye, Furphy. Aye, Guru. Aye, Hicks. Aye, Hutchings. Aye, James. Aye, Kinski. Aye, Cole. Aye, Cost. Aye, Landon. Aye, McEwen. Aye, Nethercott. Aye, Pappas. Aye, Perkins. Aye, Rothfuss. Aye, Salazar. Aye, Schuler. Aye, Scott. Aye, Steinmetz. Aye, Wasserberger. Aye, President Dockstader. Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 11, 30 aye.
By your vote, you have concurred with the House amendments on Senate File 11. Senator Rothfuss, are you ready with message number 267?
Yes, I am, Mr. President.
Hey, read it in.
Message number 267, referencing Senate File 101, epinephrine and naloxone administration authority.
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. President, I move message number 267, requesting concurrence on Senate File 101, epinephrine and naloxone administration authority, and ask the body to vote aye. Mr. President, this small amendment simply conforms another portion of statute that was originally missed when drafting. It was a request made by our LSO attorneys, and I hope everyone can support concurrence along with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion is the Senate do concur on Senate File 101 and vote aye. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote on Senate File 101. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? I, Nethercott. I, Pappas. I, Perkins. I, Rothfuss. I, Salazar. I, Schuler. I, Scott. I, Steinmetz. I, Wasserberger. I, President Dockstader.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 10130, aye.
By your vote, you've concurred with the House amendments on Senate File 101. 101. Senator Boner, are you ready with message number 258?
I am, Mr. President.
Read it in, please.
Message number 258, referencing Senate File number 8, Weed and Pest Reorganization.
Thank you, Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of message 258 referencing Senate File 8. I ask for the body to vote aye. Ladies and gentlemen, what this, the House did, or what the other chamber did, was went ahead and what made was basically a technical correction. On page 2, line 16, we're referencing all lands under the control of the state of Wyoming. That's not really what we want. We want all the lands under the control of the state of Wyoming and the Board of Land Commissioners. So we're not catching, state parks or what have you, any and all property ever owned by the state of Wyoming. So it's a good catch, good correction. Doesn't change the intent or the effect of the bill, but it's a good technical correction. I ask that you vote aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion is the Senate do concur on Senate File 8. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 8. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Conflict? Thank you. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 8, 29 aye, 1 conflict.
By your vote, you have concurred with the House amendments on Senate File 8. Joint Conference Committee report. Senator Landon, are you ready with message number 222?
Mr. President, I am. I would move the Joint Conference Committee.
Let's have it read.
Ready, and I
Let's
apologize.
read it real quick.
Joint Conference Committee report on Senate File 40, Criminal Record Dissemination, Military Department, reference House Message number 22, signed Senators Landon and Anderson, Representatives McGuire, Burt, and Oakley.
Thank you, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, I would move the Joint Conference Committee report referencing Senate File 40, that is Message 222, Criminal Record Dissemination, Military Department. Fellow Senators, this bill has changed since it left the Senate, and we went down to visit with our counterparts on the other side, and quite frankly decided that the language that our good Judiciary Chairman had put in the bill, and it was taken out down on the other end, simply makes it so that this bill still accomplishes some things, just not quite as many as we had hoped. This is the product, Mr. President, of an interim topic, and you might remember me referencing a meeting in November where we had a report from our military department. We came back in January for a special meeting and took up some issues that arose out of that testimony, and this was one of them, Mr. President. An effort to try to help the military to obtain the information they need with regard to criminal activity, et cetera, from our local law enforcement agencies. There seemed to be a little bit of reluctance on the part of some to provide that information to the military. As we looked at our statutes, fellow senators, we are convinced that the language that remains in this bill actually does some good. The language that remains is that the for purposes of obtaining criminal history record information on prospective employees, volunteers, or military members serving in active duty or in the Wyoming National Guard. And so underneath 719-106, we not only provide that the military department can obtain this criminal history record information for prospective employees and volunteers, but we also have opened the door so that they can receive that information for military members serving in active duty and the National Guard. Mr. President, we think that's important. You'll notice down on line 10, we insert the language and defined in 719-103. 719-103 in our statutes, Mr. President, are the definitions underneath criminal history records. Just to give you an idea of all that that entails, that includes records and data compiled by criminal justice agencies on individuals for the purpose of identifying criminal offenders, et cetera, arrests, detentions, indictments, information, pre-trial proceedings, nature and disposition of criminal charges, sentencing, et cetera, et cetera. If I take you back to 719-106, paragraph A says, Mr. President, criminal history record information shall be disseminated by criminal justice agencies to the following. And if you go down to paragraph 15, it says the military department for the purposes of obtaining criminal history record information. So, Mr. President, I'm sorry for that lengthy discussion, but it does point to the fact that we already have some pretty good statutes in place. We open the door a little bit more. I think this helps our military. I think this bill is worthy of support. We didn't get all of what we wanted, but that's kind of the way it works here in the Wyoming legislature. So I would ask for your aye vote.
Any discussion? Any discussion? All right, the motion is that the Senate do adopt Joint Conference Committee Report, message number 222 to Senate File 40 and vote aye. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 to Senate File 40. Roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? James?
Excused.
Aye. Landon? James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salzar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 to Senate File 40, 30 aye.
By your vote, you voted to adopt Joint Conference Committee Report number 1. It's message number 222. This is to Senate File 40. Okay. Senate will stand at ease until the sound of the gavel.
somebody asked us who we are, I guess. I'm not sure. It's just kind of Joe's thing. You mind?
Mic check test. Mic check test. Five bills to start with or something like that.
Test, test, test. 1, 2.
Senate will come back to order. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, March 9, 2022, message number 269. Mr. President, the Senate File 102, Second Amendment Protection Act, passed the House on third reading in an amended form. Ayes 43, noes 15, excused 2. The House respectfully asks the Senate to concur by adopting amendments. Signed, Wendy Harding, House Chief Clerk.
Okay. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, bills on third reading and final passage. Do you have a consent list?
Thank you, Mr. President. We do. I move third reading consent list, which is follows. House Bill 2, disposition of water rights. Is that right, Pete?
That's correct. House Bill 5, next.
House Bill 5, wild horse and burrow management. House Bill 10, tribal reference amendments. House Bill 31, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program. House Bill 63, county and district attorneys salary amendments. House Bill 71, driving while license suspended, enhancement amendment.
Thank you. Would anybody like any of these bills removed from the consent list? Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I didn't catch that. Is House Bill 31 on the consent list?
Correct.
I'd like to have that removed.
Okay, House Bill 31 removed. Anybody else want anything removed from the consent list? Okay. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass? House Bill 2, disposition of water rights. House Bill 5, wild horse and burrow management. House Bill 10, tribal reference amendments. House Bill 63, county and district attorneys salaries amendments. House Bill 71, driving while license suspended, enhancement and amendment. Chief Clerk, call the roll. We're missing a Chief Clerk. Just take a minute and we'll have Sergeant of Arms find the MIAs. All right, I think we've got everybody. One more sweep. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but we're not quite at that point. Okay. Sergeant at Arms, one more look around. Okay. let's go ahead and get started. Once again, I'm going to repeat this consent list, folks. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? House Bill 2, Disposition of Water Rights. House Bill 5, Wild Horse and Borough Management. House Bill 10, Tribal Reference Amendments. House Bill 63, County and District Attorneys' Salary Amendments. House Bill 71, Driving While License Suspended Enhancement Amendment. Chief Clerk, call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson. Baldwin. Beitman. Boner. Bouchard. Case. Cooper. Driscoll. Ellis. French. Murphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. James. Kinski. Cole. Cost. Landon. McEwen. Nethercott. Pappas. Perkins. Rothfuss. Salazar. Schuler. Scott. Steinmetz. Wasserberger. Bouchard. Aye. President Dockstader. On the consent list, 30 aye. House Bill 2. Are there any changes? Ellis, aye to no. Case, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 2, 28 aye, 2 no. House Bill 5, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 5, 30 aye. House Bill 10, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 10, 30 aye. House Bill 63, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 63, 30 aye. House Bill 71, are there any changes? Beitman, aye to no. Salazar, aye to no. Guru, aye to no. McEwen, aye to no. Perkins, aye to no. Driscoll, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 71, 24 aye, 6 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 2, House Bill 5, House Bill 10, House Bill 63, House Bill 71 have passed the Senate. Bills on third reading. House Bill 31, please read it in.
House Bill 31 engrossed, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to higher education.
Senator Hicks, you had this removed?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we need a little more discussion about what this potential program does and doesn't do. And we had a really very robust discussion the other day. But after listening to that discussion, Mr. Chairman, and then going back and spending some time on the bill, I think there's some misperceptions out there of what the program is intended to do and what the bill really does. And so, Mr. Chairman, if I can just walk you through what my concerns are.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, when you go to page, on the engrossed version, and if you go to page 10, and this gets down to, we get down to on line 19 and 21, and it talks about the eligibility. And so the eligibility for this program is to pursue a degree or certificate, Mr. Chairman. That's what we're trying to do, is take those individuals that are eligible, they're 24 years or older, been in Wyoming for 1 year, may have lived there before, come back, apply for workforce services. All those things are fine, Mr. Chairman, but when we talk about a scholarship to pursue a degree or a certificate, and I want to spend a little bit of time here, because all the discussion that we had was about helping those people go back that lost jobs or wanted to move into a higher career professional field. Mr. Chairman, that's not what this bill does. What the bill does is says you can go get 2 years more of education, but it doesn't require you to go get 2 years of education and even a field in Wyoming that there's job opportunities in, Mr. Chairman. It just says you get 2 more years of scholarship to go take a number of classes. There's no requirement in the bill whatsoever that it says it has to be in a field where there's available jobs, where there's employers that are seeking employment. This is a universal college bill is what this is, the way it's currently drafted. And Mr. Chairman, so that's my first concern. You know, as somebody that spent 11 years in college, I would have loved it if this was an opportunity back in those days to get a little additional time. I spent 3 years in community colleges. I love community college, Mr. President. This would have been a wonderful tool. I was one of those individuals that went out and worked in the oil and gas industry for a few years, didn't know what I wanted to do. This would have been a great opportunity, Mr. Chairman, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did spend 3 years in community colleges. So pursue a course or pursue a degree or a certificate. Mr. Chairman, so let's flip over a little further into the bill. So if we go on over now, Mr. Chairman, there's some really good things in this bill, and there's some things that I don't think they're going to get us to where we think we're going with it. So when you go to page 16 and you go down to line 11, it says, first preference shall be given to students who receive a scholarship under this article immediately preceding the academic term and remain eligible to receive a scholarship. And so if you've got one of these the first year and you want to go into a couple of years of education, that may be a field that there's no available jobs in Wyoming. You go to the front of the line, Mr. Chairman. That is first priority. So we're going to pay somebody a scholarship in a field, whatever they choose, not one that the gap analysis that our workforce service says, we need nurses, we need welders, we need truck drivers. No, this says if I decided I wanted to go back and get a degree in underwater basket weaving or some other profession, and I got accepted to do this, then I get the scholarship the next. I'm in line to do that over somebody that says we have a demand out here. So those are the first people in the priority. So I get back to what my colleague from Campbell County, and if this bill did what he said it did, I'd be all for it. Because what he said is when our miners lose their job due to the next layoff associated with the war on hydrocarbons, this is the tool to get us there. It doesn't necessarily do that, Mr. Chair. It just says if you want to take 4 more semesters at college on a degree or certificate program, whether there's a job waiting for you out there or not, we're going to do that. You only have to be a resident. have to be over 24 years old, have to sign up for workforce services. Now, Mr. Chairman,
Let's look for a concluding comment. You're at time.
Mr. Chairman, there is one pretty good provision in here, is the next one, and it basically has an employer requirement. But they get second preference, Mr. Chairman. So that concludes my remarks for right now, Mr. Chairman, for my first time.
Thank you. Further discussion? I'm going to go Senator Ellis, Senator Scott, Senator Cost in that order. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, we had a lot of discussion about how this bill transformed. And the first versions that we saw, you know, working this bill over the interim in your Joint Education Committee had a lot of barriers for someone to apply. It said, you know, if you're a convicted felon, we don't even apply. And so we started thinking about the kind of the tenor and tone that this bill had, Mr. President, and we started thinking about, you know, those convicted felons. What are we sending? What kind of message are we sending? You know, you're out of jail and sorry, we're never going to look at you again. So we had these conversations about trying to cast a wide net so a lot of people would be eligible to apply. But unlike the Hathaway, which is an entitlement, this is not. This is discretionary. How do we narrow in and focus how this is going to work? So I want to direct your attention to page 16, line 16. The commission shall, and we're talking about the Community College Commission, shall promulgate rules in consultation with the University of Wyoming, the Department of Workforce Services, the Wyoming Business Council, and other stakeholders, including industry representatives. The rules shall provide for a preference to award scholarships which considers workforce shortages and economic development needs of communities, regions, and the state. Then we talk about the preferences. So we really tried to give the commission the ability to do that very thing through rulemaking. We don't know when this will take effect. You know, certainly if it, you know, we set it up initially with very minimal appropriation, there've been more work has been done to the appropriation, but maybe this doesn't take effect for a while. So we shouldn't be predicting in this chamber today what those economic needs are. Is it nurses? Is it welders? But we trust our community colleges to sort through that. So the rulemaking is flexible and appropriately recognizes that that might change depending on when, if and when this were ever to take effect. And so, you know, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that we're going to see a huge number of people using this for underwater basket weaving. And that's why we have some reporting requirements. If you go to other sections of the bill, it talks about what kind of reporting we want. And we want to know what kind of degrees, what kind of certificates, what kind of majors, how many students. And so this is a living scholarship that we can go back and look at time and again to make sure it's meeting our needs. Because this isn't just about this providing students with opportunities. We're trying to find ways to improve our communities and address those workforce shortages and skilled labor that we so desperately hear from time and again from industry leaders. So I just want to push back. A lot of thought has been given to this. Of course, we can always amend it to improve on it. And I think that the bringers of this bill recognize that we've got a good thing started if we get this program up and running. Fine-tuning in the future, as we do with all of our legislation, all of our programs, is appropriate. This is a really good starting point. So I just want to push back. This isn't going to produce more underwater basket weaving degrees. No offense to those people pursuing that degree right now. But Mr. Chairman, that's what this bill is about, or Mr. President. I'd urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Back to Senator Scott, then over to Senator Cost. Go ahead.
Mr. President, would echo everything you just heard and really point out, you've got to look at what the bill actually provides here, and that's preference for workforce shortages, economic development needs. You've got a first preference for students who've received a scholarship so that they can complete what they were setting out to do. And Mr. President, I think the example you're going to see the most of there is somebody who's applied to go on to a nursing degree. That's a 2-year program. You get associates and an RN at the local community college. That's a desperate workforce need that we have. And then the second preference, students who've secured an industry sponsorship, those people have a job waiting for them, otherwise the industry wouldn't be sponsoring them. So, and Mr. President, I don't think we're going to see any students that are not in those categories anytime in the foreseeable future. And, you know, we can adjust this. A future legislature down the road can adjust this as needed, but that's the preference here. So this is focused on what is needed, and we had tremendous testimony from industry that this was something they desperately needed because it would meet a very real need we had.
Let's go to Senator Cost, then to Wasserberger. Senator Wasserberger after Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I echo the exact same things that the two colleagues previously have said, but also you want to remember that for us to come out with a document and try to specify the rules before the rules group has been able to step up would be kind of, in my idea, backwards on our thinking. The second thing we need to understand is as we get this set up, there's going to be a need for changes probably in different parts. That's where when somebody such as the good senator from down south has great ideas, get involved, be part of it, become part of that group and have that active input so that we can make it better and we can make it stronger. But for now, let's get the program started. Let's get these people involved. Our colleges are ready to take this on, and let's be successful with what we're trying to achieve for those students that are older, that have lost their jobs and now want to move on. I think that we need to look for a favorable vote, please.
Senator Wasserberger, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of House Bill 31 and ask you to vote aye. This bill will help fund over 212,000 adults in Wyoming who do not have any further training or certification past high school. The scholarship may be used at the University of Wyoming or at a community college. The requirements for this scholarship are you must be a Wyoming resident for 1 year, you must be older than 24, the student must have completed a FAFSA for student aid to determine unmet financial need, and the student must be registered with the Department of Workforce Services for applicable training assistance. A student cannot receive the award if they are currently on a Hathaway scholarship, not a U.S. citizen, owes money on other financial aid programs, is incarcerated, or have previously received this award for 4 academic terms. So this is a one-time shot. This bill is designed to benefit adult learners throughout our state. Currently, the bill is funded by a $10 million appropriation from the LISRA account. The funding will be used as an endowment and will be available for adult learners to retrain themselves. The interest off of the fund will be used to fund the scholarship and will be available every year. The bill is an investment in our future and can help meet the needs of businesses looking to relocate to Wyoming, as well as those who have started there and are looking to expand their business. This bill is pro-business. Industries from all over Wyoming are supporting this bill. They need a trained, skilled workforce more than anything else right now, and this bill will help do that. The bill includes language from the Wyoming Works statutes that places a priority on workforce shortages and economic development, which we just talked about, for needs to our communities and our state. The bill does not require a degree attainment, but can be used for certification or training. So if you wanted to get a certified nurse assistant degree, which takes about 6 weeks, and then there's a national board certification test, that's a certification, and that person can start as a CNA, which is highly regarded in any hospital. This bill is designed to meet the most pressing needs of workforce development in Wyoming and helps working adults afford a career change involving new job skills and training. Bill can help retrain dislocated workers like those out of work after a mine closure or a bust in the oil patch. And members of the Senate, remind you, and I know you know, Article 7, Section 16, tuition free. The university shall be as nearly free as possible. That's the Wyoming State Constitution, and we've all heard that before. Members of the Senate, this war on fossil fuels will continue when these good times are gone. Wyoming's Tomorrow is the counterpoint to the Hathaway Scholarship for merit-based traditional aid students. Wyoming's Tomorrow is the perfect counterpoint to meet the needs of alternative, non-traditional adult learners displaced in Wyoming's boom and bust cycle. Mr. President, I ask you to vote aye on House Bill 31.
Thank you for the discussion. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this. I think it comes to the table with good intentions. I think this is going to lead us down a road with a disconnect from industry. I think industry needs to be a part of this more directly, money-wise, and not because I want to force money from industry, but industry knows what it needs. And I think we've had cooperation in the past where industry and our educational system have gotten together and put out good products. We're in a rush here to solve what? We're in a rush here to try to make something better. And I do agree with the prior speaker about our university should be as free or near free as possible. I don't know how this equates to this exactly. I would like to see that happen more often with our university students from the state of Wyoming. I just don't know why we need to dump this money into a program with good intentions, but without a cooperative agreement between industry, the people that are going to use these people, not just folks taking, no offense to basket weavers, but the basket weaving. We need a program and a way of moving our people forward into those new jobs. But the jobs have to have a job at the end of the education. And I just don't see the puzzle pieces fitting together right now. I would certainly look forward to hearing more about this at a future point in time, but at this point in time, I just can't see that this is the right way to spend this kind of money on a program with an outcome where I can't see it's really causally connected to industry and they're supportive with money in the game. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Folks, there's two reasons to vote against this bill. First, it's unnecessary because it duplicates programs that have already been stood up. They're not well known, but they've already been stood up. I talked the other day about the millions of dollars that the Workforce Services Department has put together and is rolling out for training grants, about how industry and the workforce services and the colleges have come together to do gap analysis and identify the most needed skills. It's all underway already. It's interesting that how little is known about it. In fact, after discussion the other day, Mr. President turned to me and said, I've got a car dealer that's down to 2 mechanics. What's the name of that program? I need to give the name of that program to my auto mechanic so he can get his people trained. Here, the President of the Senate didn't know about it. There's all kinds of people in the state that do not yet know about what is being rolled out that renders this unnecessary. You heard it. The language is right out of Wyoming Works. About 3/4 of the pages here you could scratch off as something that's already an existing law. It's duplicative and unnecessary. But what is new? What is new? The first thing that's new is Wyoming Works is limited to skills, career technical education. This is not. You can get a degree in philosophy with this. We have a Hathaway program for the best students. This is a Hathaway for the people who are not eligible for the Hathaway. It's higher education paid for everybody. I remember last presidential campaign, there were some people not of my political persuasion that were pushing that idea. I didn't think we'd see it come to Wyoming, but here we are. The other thing that's new is it wants to drive it all with an endowment. Colleges are near and dear to my heart, CTE, skills training, but we can't all fund our favorite causes with an endowment. The real answer is we as a legislature have got to find a sustainable funding solution for our community colleges. That is the real answer, and that's why the colleges lined up behind this, because they're desperate for an answer. This will not get them the kind of resources that they need. On and against the bill.
All right, back to Senator Wasserberger. Oh, Senator Wasserberger, where you have a second, let's go over to Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few little things that I think are kind of important to mention about the scholarship. And we actually started working on this about 4 years ago with the Tomorrow's Task Force. There's a couple of other folks in here besides myself that worked on this. When we looked at these scholarships, there are a number of them around the country that have been very successful. Most of them are called Promise scholarships, or Hope scholarships. But this one, the Tomorrows, is the same idea. And again, to retrain those non-traditional students that may have either never gone to college or maybe have went and dropped out, never got a certificate, or those who maybe just want to change career paths and look for something better. Just a couple things about it, I think, that are important to note. First of all, just a comment on the Wyoming Works. I thought that was an amazing program, and I think it was something that really, really worked. And I think this scholarship could even be bigger and better. The problem with Wyoming Works, unless I'm mistaken, is that the funding for that was taken out of the higher education budget. So it was great while it was there, but if it's still funded, then go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong on that. But that program kind of piggybacks onto this one, I think. The other thing about this program that I think is important to note is the preferences. We talked about the preferences, and I know when this was handed off to the Education Committee, they spent quite a bit of time also talking about that. The preferences, there's a lot of mays in there, not shalls. Preferences may be given also to students based on the length of their Wyoming residency. So if you have somebody that's been here a couple of years, and then you have somebody else who's grown up in Wyoming and been here their entire life, they'll probably get a preference. The other thing that I think might at least add to the conversation with the good senator from Sweetwater County is on the bottom of page 16, it talks a little bit about industry and their buy-in. And preference may be given to students without a degree, and industry sponsorship, if they want to get preference there, that's the second tier. Industry sponsorship means a written contractual agreement between the student and an employer, where the employer agrees to pay for at least 25% of the employee's necessary educational costs and may include a requirement that the employee must repay any funds expended by the employer under the terms of the agreement if the employee terminates the employment relationship without good cause. So there has been industry involvement. That part right there, where the preference is given to those who are going to go into an industry where maybe we do have some shortages. I think this basically tells you that there is sponsorship there, that they will jump on board with this, and they will do their best to try and get those students the kind of careers and jobs that they need. So with that, I would ask that you would vote in a favorable fashion for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go Senator Wasserberger and then Senator Beitman in that order. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. For my second time, actually, to my good friend from Sweetwater County, on page 17, line 4 through 6 of your corrected engrossed purple copy, it states, second preference shall be given to students who have secured an industry sponsorship. So what that means is a business can sponsor a student and they can go through this program. So there is a lot of business involvement. And just to finish up, Wyoming is one of the last states to establish an adult grant scholarship for working adults. Other states have seen significant positive results from establishing an adult grant. Further, we've seen LCCC tested this with their Rediscover program with very successful outcomes. And finally, a well-known education foundation in Wyoming awarded each community college in Wyoming for adult grants for a scholarship for this current year, while the legislature worked through the Wyoming's Tomorrow legislation. The results of adult grants in our state and in other states have been nothing short of incredible. And so on behalf of the 1,500 miners that were laid off 6 years ago, and we know we're going to see our economy change, I ask you to vote aye on this bill. Thank you.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and against. And I'm on and against because I'm worried what this will do to tuition costs. I think, once you start putting more government dollars out there, pushing it out there, what's going to happen is they're going to ratchet up tuition, just economics. It happens every time the more support you put out there, the more the colleges raise the tuition and fees. I sent you all a graphic of, the most increased changes over the last 10 years, or not last 10 years, but in a 10-year period, it's hospital services, textbooks, and tuition. What do those three have in common? A lot of government money going and not much competition. So if we want to help people get from the workforce, get re-educated and go back to school, we need to worry about, are there college credits going to transfer? That's a big issue, Mr. President, in my district. I hear a lot about, well, I'd love to go back to college, but none of my credits will transfer from 20 years ago. We're not doing anything to fix that, Mr. President. The other thing is the affordability factor. I'd love to go back to school, they say, but I just can't afford it. It's too expensive. Obviously, this will help some people, but some people it won't help. And I'm afraid down the road, it's going to raise tuition costs for the people that don't qualify for this. So that's why I'm on and against, Mr. President.
All right, further discussion. Senator Rothfuss, then Cost.
Thank you, Mr. President, for my first time on and for the bill. Mr. President, this is an effort that we've been undertaking on the Education Committee and through the legislature for quite a few years, trying to find solutions to provide educational opportunity for those that aren't eligible for the Hathaway. They're maybe non-traditional students, maybe they need new tools, new training, but they're not just recent graduates. And we know when we look at the state of Wyoming, when we look at the demographics, one of the challenges we have is that higher education and continuing education and workforce training. It's what we hear about, it's what we understand. And for those reasons, industry, our businesses, have come to us and asked for this type of legislation. They support this very piece of legislation as a tool that will help them to get the trained workforce that they need. We've heard suggestions, Mr. President, that this is about a funding mechanism for the colleges, and that's why the colleges support this. That's not why the colleges support this. The colleges support this program because it furthers their educational mission. Colleges are not just there to make money. They're not a for-profit entity. They're motivated by the educational mission that they support and they provide. They want to see people attending the colleges throughout the state. And this provides that opportunity where the opportunity does not currently exist. It's possible this isn't perfect. It's possible we'll come back and we'll amend it a little bit. We do that over time. And if we hear concerns from industry, from the educators, from the colleges, we can come back and fix that, but we need to start it. We've had nothing but favorable feedback from the educational community, from business, from industry, because they see this as a real opportunity, Mr. President. On for the bill.
Senator Cost, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm forced to push back a little bit on a couple of things. First of all, credits from 20 years ago. I think there's been a lot changed in 20 years. Credits are back to 5 to 6 years, makes sense, and they allow that. And they're working harder to get that more in line through the university and the colleges. So I don't see that as a major hurdle to cross. Second thing is we talk about funding. We talk about the cost of it. We talk about setting up different funds. And at the same time that we do that and we voted down those, yesterday it seemed like $9 million cut out of our fund didn't matter much at all. So I'm not understanding where we're coming on those two sides. We say we need the money, we say we're short, but yet we're going ahead and voting out, we'll give $9 million to somewhere. This fund, this takes care of our people, our young people, for future workforce people. We're here to help our constituents. We're here to help the people of our state. This helps. This opens the doors for people that are frustrated with loss of jobs. It opens the doors for those people that have a chance now to maybe change their profession. And on top of that, maybe more important than any of that, the rules will guide what they're going to be taking, because they'll set the rules up to work with business so that that's in line. This is to help where we need jobs and to help our people. It's the right thing to do, people.
All right, ready for the question? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, just want to address a couple of issues there. I'll start with this. We've heard favorable input from industry. What's interesting, that comment keeps coming up, Mr. Chairman, but you know, I have more natural gas producing companies in my district than anybody in the state of Wyoming. I've got coal mines in my district. I've got pipeline companies in my district. I got heavy construction companies in my district. I got transportation companies in my district. I got all kinds of industry in my district, Mr. President. And I don't know who we is, but they sure haven't been beating down my door, or ringing my cell phone, or sending me emails saying they have to have this program, Mr. President. I haven't got a single call from a single industry saying if you don't get this program stood up, we're going to fail. Haven't heard that. So I'm not sure who we is, Mr. Chairman. So let's talk about another issue. It's all in rules. It's going to give priority in rules. Do we really think that rules supersede statutes? They don't, folks. So read the bill. Second preference shall be given to students who secure industry sponsorship. Second preference. So when you go through this funding matrix, and if this is fully funded, yeah, they're going to give them preference rules, but it doesn't preclude all of these other degree programs to come in here and participate in this program. Doesn't do that, Mr. Chairman. Doesn't do that. I love the industry preference here because finally, industry that would actually pay for 25%. This is exactly the type of program that we said set up. But I have a question on this. So if the student enrolls in that, the industry's paying for 25% of it, and the student doesn't finish, he has to pay the industry sponsor back. I see nothing in this bill that says if you go in here for a year or two and you screw around in college and you get a D average, you don't owe the state a single dime back. There's no circumstances whatsoever that says you can take this money and you can go to school for 2 years. Oh yeah, you may be right there on the edge. And then we get to the provision back here and says, well, what if there's not enough money, Mr. President? So what if we get to the point where there's more scholarships than there is money? So let's go to that page. Page 18. The payment to eligible institutions shall be reduced on a first-come, first-served basis using the student's application date for the scholarship. So I don't know how that works with the rules that says we're going to give preference. Is that preference based on a first-come, first-served basis? Mr. Chairman, that's not what that says. That says if there is not enough money, first come, first serve, you get in line. I don't see how that ties back into the preference that we're going to give them for a workforce program. But Mr. Chairman, it doesn't preclude all these other people from participating in these programs. And if we don't narrow it down to the very thing that we're trying to accomplish in here, I'm guaranteeing you, if I was a student back in those days and this was available, I'd have spent 4 years in community college, Mr. President.
All right, ready for the question? Senator Scott, and then Senator Ellis.
Mr. President, let me respond to a few of the allegations. Mr. President, the testimony we had from industry in committee was that they needed this, was that there were not enough current programs available, and these were from people who knew what was available. And they were from key industries, construction, healthcare. There were enough of them so I can't remember them. That was the theme we heard. There isn't enough there right now, so they need this. Second, the talk about the community colleges and why shouldn't we give the community colleges?
a stable funding source. Your Joint Education Committee brought a bill to do that. It didn't get anywhere this time. We will be back. And it will be an endowment, because if you look for a stable funding source, Mr. President, it's either an endowment or a tax increase. We think an endowment in good times is the way to go. It's a classic way to deal with one-time funding in our uncertain funding situation. It varies so much. Costs going up. There have been, over the years, tuition cost increases, both at the community colleges, where it's the Community College Commission that does it, and at the university, where it's the trustees that do it. Show me where in the society there haven't been cost increases. There is inflation. It's particularly bad right now. And that's all the more reason to fund something like this, because those cost increases are hitting the students. If the institutions were to do something unreasonable, then we have the power, constitutional power, if we ever wanted to exercise it, to rein those cost increases in. We do, as the legislature. We haven't, to my knowledge, ever tried to do that. But, Mr. President, we've got the power to do it. You will see cost increases because there is inflation. I guarantee you. All the more reason to do this. Mr. President, this is an effective means to deal with a very real need that's there. Don't look at the smoke screens, look at what the bill actually does, on and for them.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President, and briefly, if you read page 12 of the bill, and we're talking about these wild, crazy kids who are just gonna go there and waste all this money and flunk out. I mean, that's the picture we're painting, right? Let's paint another picture. I'll be the first to tell you, I was the first in my family to go to college. My family didn't want me to go. It wasn't easy to go. I look at my nieces and nephews that are my age and younger, and some of them weren't ready for college. I have a nephew now who doesn't live in Wyoming, so he won't benefit from this, but now he's in his mid-30s, he's got a child, and all of a sudden, he's finally ready. And good for him, he's got a certificate, went back to school, got a certificate to do IT security. But it wasn't easy, that stuff's expensive. He's working, he now has a child. Yeah, that's the picture I want to paint, and those are the people in Wyoming I want to help. So are we going to be wasting this money? Read page 12. To be eligible, the max you can get is $7,200, and that's the equivalent of 4 full-time academic semesters. To remain eligible, you have to make satisfactory academic progress, and that's defined earlier in the bill. You have to maintain a 2.0 GPA, and in my neck of the woods, Mr. President, C's get degrees. If that student needs a C to get that certificate, that's good enough, and that's what this requires. They have to also meet other criteria established wherever they're going. And we make concessions, recognizing that some of those students might need a waiver on that continuous progress if they're serving in the military, if they're doing religious service or other good cause, health-related issues. If they don't comply with this, they are ineligible from receiving another scholarship. This is how we treat the Hathaway. We could put some punitive measures in there, Mr. President. We could say, if you flunk out, we want our money back. So what are we gonna do? Turn our attorney generals loose to try and go after you if you owe, for 1 credit hour? We did a government efficiency study years ago that talked about how the state of Wyoming, if we just collected money that we earned, how we could reduce, some of the obligations that were out there. And in some cases, Mr. President, it wasn't worth it for the state of Wyoming to go out there and try and recover those funds. This makes sense. This is practical. The net benefit, though, is going to benefit our communities. So instead of thinking about the irresponsible young person that's going to go to college and drink too much and flunk out and stay there forever, rethink who you're thinking about. This is about people who are working and trying to better their lives, who are juggling work obligations and family obligations. These are people who are trying to make something better for themselves, to live the life that they want. Shouldn't we help them? I think so. Vote aye.
Ready for the question. Question being called. House Bill, Senator Kinski.
I do want to correct the record.
Okay.
Wyoming Works is funded. It came out of ARPA. It came out of ARPA money, so it didn't show up in the standard budget. It's fully funded. For the 1,600 miners in Gillette, we have what they need in Wyoming Works, unless they want to get a liberal arts degree. The programs are there. We already have acted on this. To expand it this much to students that want to go back and get a liberal arts degree, to create yet a new entitlement, as my friend from Camel Country said, 212,000 adults, it's a budget buster. No on the bill.
All right, folks. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. To all of those that have your Bachelor of Arts degree, which I believe is the majority of the opponents, that would be considered a liberal arts degree. I'm glad to see your success here in this chamber today, and I'm grateful that the opportunity that was afforded to you to have that education. I know I have 3 of those degrees, and I am grateful to have them, and no doubt they allowed me to be in here today as one of the few Wyoming women who gets to serve in the Senate. So there's this wonderful narrative about workforce training, because we only like welders and auto body mechanics and construction workers. You're right. That really only helps really one gender at the most, and yes, I'm providing stereotypes, and yes, we all have those women in our communities who are serving in those non-traditional roles. But there is a gender wage gap in this state. That's part of the reason, is that those jobs are primarily filled by those men. This is an opportunity for those women across our state who have chosen to raise their families in their communities to go back to school and get higher paying jobs. What do we know about the unequivocal, irrefutable data associated with education attainment and salary? There is a direct and profound correlation between the two. Did you know that our Wyoming industries and businesses need more than welders and construction workers? They actually need women filling roles in numerous businesses and industries across the state where they can read, write, perform analysis. This bill will help those women. I know it's really great to do the narrative so we can pass it through this chamber, that it's about construction workers, but it's about so much more. And I support the women that are doing that, and I also support those women who want to work in a job that requires an education, that requires an advancement, that requires a promotion, that requires them being a boss. But they have their families in our rural communities in Wyoming. They can't go down to Laramie. And our outreach is our outreach, right? These 8 colleges across our state, allowing the mothers of this state to advance their education and advance their compensation in those single houses, which we know they are. We know they are. 40% of the children in Wyoming are born on Medicaid. Fact. Fact. This is a way out of that. This is a way for those women to advance, to end up in this chamber someday, like so many of you with your liberal arts degrees. I urge your aye vote.
Okay, question. And I'll note this, folks. What we have here is under Article 16, Section 6, loan of credit donations prohibited, works of eternal improvement. Any legislation establishing or increasing the percentage of any fund that may be invested under this subparagraph shall be passed only by a 2/3 vote of all members of each of the 2 houses voting separately. 2/3 vote. Okay. That being said, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I know that is the Constitution, we haven't had that discussion on this particular piece of legislation at any point, and I think it's worth a little further consideration. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about why this legislation would require that. We have done this in the past where we're creating new funds, maybe that's what we're looking at here. That definitely didn't require. So maybe a little more discussion. I realized that we were attempting to close debate, but end of third reading, second chamber, first discussion on that is new to me.
Senator Scott, did you have the same question?
Were you making a ruling that this requires?
Well, no, I'm bringing from legal. This is Article 16, Section 6, loan of credit. And then if you need to reference the points in the bill, it'd be page 21, 9-4-715, and page 22, line 5. That's what puts us where we're at right now. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, just a point of order. What was the reference again? And it came from our legal staff? Is
Correct, correct.
Was delivered
Article
to you?
16, yes.
What's-
Article 16, Section 6.
Just a little discomforting that it comes at the very end of a long debate at the second chamber, third reading. Thank you for repeating that.
Okay. Senator Case?
Mr. President, how about if we lay this bill back for one more day in third reading?
Absent objection. Jack, we got objections. Sorry, Senator Case. Go ahead.
But Mr. President, I do think that laying it back for a little longer, or maybe standing at ease until the sound of the gavel, so that those of us that had no idea this was coming could maybe look into it a little bit, because this is an awkward time. It seems like a great discussion.
Not
perhaps in
opposed for
committee of the
that,
whole.
and I'm needed in another meeting downstairs, so we'll do that then. Is that okay? You okay, Senator Scott?
That section has never been held to apply to an education bill. Education is entirely separate from that section.
Okay. Senator Case.
Mr. President, I would hope that we would have the courtesy to suspend the two-talk minimum, the 2 times at 5 minutes, if this is kind of a new subject on this bill that we need to discuss.
Right, yeah, it's outside of the bill itself, so, okay. So we're gonna stand at ease till the sound of the gavel, okay? Whoa. Senator Cooper,
Yeah, privilege of the floor, please.
please do.
My 2 colleagues and I from Northwest
Whoa,
Wyoming
everybody
would like
just
to.
sit down for a moment. Oh, you're together. Oh, he's with him. Okay.
We're together.
Oh, you're all
Yeah, we are. We'd like to
I'm
acknowledge
tracking you now.
the new president of Northwest College, no longer interim, President Lisa Watson.
Thank you. Apologize, Senator French, Senator Cost. You were all teaming up. Okay. All right, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, just a point of privilege real quickly.
Please.
The president of Casper College is also right up there beside the president of Northwest. That's Darren Devine.
Okay.
So would you please welcome him? He's been listening intently as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Mr. President, as an announcement, I would say that we will meet downstairs. I think it's room 110.
Correct.
Your conference committee on the redistricting, and we will take up right away. We're due down there at 5 o'clock, so thanks.
Okay. Senator Kinski? Yeah. Yes, we'll stand at ease until we're done with that meeting. Okay, folks? We'll let the folks study deeper, but we're standing at ease till the sound of the gavel. Thank you.
That was brand new.
Folks, let's bring House Bill 31 out of the holding pattern. Okay, we're back on the bill, House Bill 31. There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read in the, do you have a question, Senator Hutchings? Go ahead.
As I sit here and I've been around, I think this is my 6th year, and I'm just trying to understand how we can bring an amendment to the bill. I'm neither on or against the bill.
Sure.
At the last moment, I think this is a privilege everybody would want when there's some debate on their bill.
Well,
So if I
sure.
could just get an explanation.
Sure,
Thank you.
Senator, I'll explain part, but I'll let the sponsor of the amendment explain too. As we worked on this with legal, it appears that we had to address something related to the Constitution. I went over that. So as you saw, folks went into it, and we were going to make a ruling, but after we discussed it, we thought the best way to address this situation was what to do with the funds and how to do it was to address it through an amendment. And the good Senator, Senator Rothfuss, has put together an amendment. So I'm gonna let him explain that. And rather than just let the whole situation continue on, I think we got an approach here that's gonna work. So with that, read in the amendment.
Thank you.
Read in the amendment.
House Bill 31, third reading amendment number 1 to engross copy, page 5, line 4, delete.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 31. Ask the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, I appreciate the time to have some opportunity to confer with the Legislative Service Office on what the concern was. And the concern specifically, if we look at the bill itself, assuming that you're looking at the corrected copy, and we go to page 22, the concern that was raised was specific to the paragraph that you see on lines 5 and 6, Romanet 16, which creates the opportunity for a Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Expenditure account to be invested in Pool A. And that's precisely where the concern was, because that's an expenditure account as opposed to an education account. Education accounts are expressly allowed by the Constitution to be by a majority. But the concern was that if this is not deemed to be an educational account, then perhaps it would need a 2/3 majority vote to be invested in Pool A. So it's just a small nuance of the bill that would be a potential violation. Rather than arguing about whether that was or wasn't a violation, it seemed prudent to simply delete those lines and not invest that fund in Pool A, which is all the amendment that you have before you does. So it deletes those lines and then removes references to the Pool A investment earlier on page 5. So those funds would be invested pursuant to law as opposed to invested through the endowment itself. So it's a minor tweak. It doesn't change anything about the substance of the bill, but those funds would receive a slightly lower rate. This is not the endowment itself. This is the expenditure account. And I would remind the body also that the funds, there will be no funds in this particular Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Expenditure account in the future anyway, because you have to have revenue off of the endowment funds before that ends up filling up as it is, Mr. President. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the third reading amendment, but what it does, and it explicitly satisfied the concerns that were raised by LSO, that was the conversation. Does this satisfy the concern that's raised that would require a 2/3 vote? The answer was yes. So if we pass this particular amendment, the obligation to have a 2/3 vote will be eliminated and we'll go back to a standard majority vote, Mr. President. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions on the amendment? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, on and against the amendment. I've been here a little longer than my colleague here from Laramie County. This is unprecedented. To get to this point where we're just about getting ready to vote, and then the president reads that it's going to take 2/3 majority under our Constitution. And then we just stop the process and then we come in and we bring a third reading amendment. Give it an up or down vote, vote no on the amendment, and then 2/3 on the bill, Mr. President. Vote no on the amendment.
Okay, let's go to Senator Perkins and then to Senator Scott.
So actually, that's really not quite accurate. And I confirm this unless they've changed their ruling. What you have is the Pool A investment requires a 2/3 vote. The rest of the bill only requires a majority vote. The effect of the vote would have been, if it wasn't 2/3 of a vote, if it didn't meet the 2/3 requirement, the ability, basically it just means that this section that we're excising now would not be able to be in effect. The rest of the bill would still pass if a majority of the body voted for it. We do that, it's basically, there's a savings clause that says that when you pass a bill like this, that only the parts that would be unconstitutional are excised, and that's what this would do. It's just simply, it's like a savings clause in a contract. If one part is somehow unenforceable, then you simply excise that part out of the contract, and the rest of the contract has to stand on its own. It's the same way that the Constitution works. It's the same way when a bill's challenged for constitutionality, they look at it that way. Just because one part of the bill might be unconstitutional doesn't mean the entire part is. This amendment removes that question from it. So this amendment removes it, so the constitutional question with respect to the investment in Pool A is removed from the bill. But again, even if you defeat this amendment and it goes in, a majority vote still results in a passage of the bill, but the parts with respect to the investment in Pool A would not occur because they would not be in line with the constitutional requirement for 2/3 of the vote. So and this is unprecedented in my years, but so is the fact that it's proceeded all the way to third reading before this issue was ever raised. So this issue could never be addressed at any time earlier. It wasn't raised in the House. The House passed it by more than a 2/3 majority, so it never came up down there. And it wasn't until just today, I believe, that legal was going through this and looking at that and came across that. And so this is the first time in my experience down here that I've ever seen this come up at the very end of a third reading, that the first time that this came out and all of a sudden it becomes knowledge. That's the first time that this has happened in my experience. So it is unprecedented. It's an unprecedented in a couple different ways. And so anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it, Mr. President.
Okay, yes, I was just noting and observing it went all the way through the other body as well. Let's go to Senator Scott. Oh, and then we'll go to Senator Landon. Okay,
And
cool.
Mr. President, let me entirely agree with what we just heard and add to it. As a practical matter, this will not affect where the money goes or any of the earnings on the money, because it will go in the endowment fund where that requirement does not exist. And it will be several sessions before we get to the point where the Pool A language would have any practical effect. So the risk if you vote down the amendment is that we will forget we need to do the 2/3 and we'll wind up with money in Pool A that isn't there properly, and then somebody will discover it and we'll have a mess then. So on and for the amendment, the simple time to pass the amendment and clean it up is right now.
Senator Landon before you. Senator Landon? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. President, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what the chairman of appropriations just said. In all my years down here, this is unprecedented. And this body has always done what is right. And what is right is we take up this third reading amendment, because never has it come to the point that it came tonight. And my question was going to revolve, and it was partly answered by the senator from Casper, because how do we avoid this in the future? Well, we couldn't have avoided this because apparently nothing was ever caught in this bill until we get all the way through the discussion on third reading. But to have that come up from the president right before a roll call vote, that can't happen. We don't want that to happen ever again. If it does, then we need to set this precedent that we're going to take a timeout, we're going to step back, and we're going to do what's right. And consideration of this amendment is right, Mr. President. Thank you.
Okay, over to Senator Hicks. And reminding folks we are on the amendment. Go ahead.
And so is the savings clause universal to everything? And I don't know, that's why I'm asking the question. Is it universal to every bill that we put out here? Because sometimes, Mr. Chairman, we actually put a savings clause in each piece of legislation. So just for my edification, is it implied that the savings clause protects every piece of legislation that we pass out of here, regardless of whether it's explicitly stated in the legislation or not? And I don't know the answer to that question.
Let's, Chairman of Appropriations, could we have you discuss this further on the
Sure.
amendment?
Sure, thank you. And I was chatting with the, I had a couple chats, one to confirm early on about the 15 votes and the effect of what 16 votes in here required to pass the bill, but 2/3 required to pass the provision with respect to Pool A. And he confirmed what I understood him to say. I repeated that back to him, and he confirmed that to me. Then I had a subsequent conversation about what I just said to you, and he confirmed that was his understanding as well. So the direct question is there a savings clause? And just when you look at that, there's a presumption that when the legislature passes a bill, there's a presumption that it is constitutional. And so when you come back and challenge legislation based upon constitutionality, there's a couple ways you do it. There's one, is it unconstitutional on its face, or two, is it unconstitutional as applied? And both of those create good challenges, and we won't go into that. But the long and short of it is, you look at the fending portion of with respect to constitutionality, and when you excise that, if it is indeed unconstitutional, you excise that piece, can the rest of the legislation stand on its own? It's just like in a contract. If you have a contract and you have something in your contract that turns out to be illegal. For example, in some states don't allow non-compete clauses in a contract. And so if you have a contract that says, all right, I'm buying you out of this business and you can't compete with me for 5 years, in Wyoming, that's enforceable. You go to another state, I've had contracts in other states where those types of provisions in contracts are void for a matter of public policy. So if that contract then goes to a state that has that and it's litigated in that state, they don't throw out the whole contract. They just come back and say that portion, that non-compete clause in the contract is unenforceable. The rest of the contract is not illegal, and that stays in place. It works the same way with constitutional, when you tax something constitutionally. If you come back one piece of legislation that might be deemed unconstitutional, if that is unconstitutional, you have to then look at the rest of the entire legislation. And if it can stand on its own and is constitutional, then it remains. It is a constitutional piece of legislation, less the unconstitutional comment in it. And so when you look at this bill and what this amendment does is it excises that piece that has the constitutional concern. And so even if this bill had passed, the bill itself is constitutional, but this stuff with respect to Pool A has potential, a substantial risk of being unconstitutional. And so that would be excised. It just means, as just has been said, that money can't be invested in Pool A without 2/3 approval of this body and 2/3 approval of the body on the other end of the hallway. But just only with respect to investment in Pool A. The rest of the thing about the scholarship and the investment and the endowment, all of that stuff is clearly within, it doesn't have anything to do with the investment of Pool A. And so the bill stands on its, the bill, Pool A is not what this bill is about. It's about a scholarship. Thank you, Mr. President.
For a little clarification as we sort this out up here too, and it fits in with what the good chairman of appropriations just said. We can vote this amendment up or down, and it would not change the majority of the membership on the bill. So in other words, we can deal with the amendment up or down, still turn around and go back to the bill, and it needs 16 votes. Let's go to Senator Scott.
And Mr. President, just to agree with the chairman of appropriations, and read you the specific language that governs, which is 81103A VII. If any provision of any act enacted by the Wyoming legislature or its application to any person or circumstance is held invalid, that invalidity does not affect other provisions or applications of the act which can be given effect without the invalid provision or application. To this end, provisions of any such act are severable. That's the general severability clause that saves us from having to put a special severability clause in all the separate acts. It's been there for ever since I can remember, and it's saved us a lot of print over the years. So the Chairman of Appropriations is exactly right, the way he described it, and that's the language that says what he said and specifically in the statute.
Senator Case, I saw you standing there a moment ago. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You know, speaking in favor of the amendment and speaking in favor of the process or the procedure we just kind of informally did here, we haven't quite done it yet, I speak very highly of it. Shows good leadership on your part, Mr. President. Take a break. We've got something that our fine staff found at the last minute. You know, something that we don't want to go out of here that's not right. We don't want to make a mistake without knowing what we're doing. So to take the break was totally appropriate. To take a little bit of time and to develop an amendment that fixes it, also entirely appropriate, I think, within our rules and within the spirit of the work that we want to achieve. The last thing we'd want is to go out having not received the 2/3 on something that needs the 2/3 and then have it all thrown up into question. I just totally agree with the other discussions. I think this is the right way to do it. I ask you to support the amendment, vote aye, and then we can have a straight up or down vote on the bill. Thank you very much, Mr.
We are
President.
on the amendment. Senator Rothfuss, you want to do any follow-up? Okay. Question on the amendment. This is third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 31. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment has passed. We're back on the bill now. Question on the bill. House Bill 31, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 31 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, call the roll.
House Bill 31, third reading, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? No. Bouchard? No. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinski? No. Cole? No. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstetter? No. Case? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 31, 16 aye, 14 no.
House Bill 31, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 31 has passed the Senate. Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Oh, Senator Wasserberger.
Having voted on the prevailing side, I move for immediate reconsideration of House Bill 31.
Okay. Immediate reconsideration been called. Again, we will vote on the reconsideration first, then we'll go back to the bill. Roll call, please, on go ahead.
To vote aye.
Well.
Mr. President.
Yeah, so technically, you just broke the rules, my friend. Yeah. I'd be open to an apology. Okay.
For breaking the rules of the Senate.
Thank you. All right. Roll call on reconsideration.
House Bill 31 for reconsideration. Roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? No. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Driscoll? No. Ellis? No. French? Aye. Murphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? No. Landon? No. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Perkins? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? No. President Dockstetter? Aye. Beitman, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. For reconsideration, 13 aye, 17 no.
Reconsideration on House Bill 31 has failed. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Thursday, March 10th.
Announcements, please. Any announcements? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow, the Joint Judiciary Committee will meet at 8 a.m. to discuss interim topics in the location that is announced online. To be determined. I'm determining that location now.
Let's give you a little help. W6 for Judiciary interim topics.
The door down the hall from our usual room, guys.
There you go. All right. Chairman Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 2 appropriations, joint, actually, it's not your committee anymore. It's joint appropriations. Will meet tomorrow at on noon recess to take up interim topics. And additionally, the CAPFIN committee will meet at 9 o'clock to take up interim topics. I believe those are both in 301 in the appropriations room.
Thank you. Over to Chairman Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Quick announcement, Transportation Committee 8 will have its interim topic meeting tomorrow at noon in W3 downstairs to consider interim topics. As an additional announcement, we're going to try to meet at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning on the redistricting effort of your conference committee. As we continue work on that, we are looking for a room. We suspect it will be 110 or 113 downstairs, Mr. President. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
9 o'clock. Thank you. Chairman Case. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your committee number 3 will meet with our friends down the hall for joint interim topics at 1 o'clock tomorrow. According to this notice that I have, it's going to be in extension room 5.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? I have one just quickly. Secretary of State's election integrity presentation will continue tomorrow. Another one at 4:30, and that will be at the Capitol Auditorium downstairs, the end of the breezeway, 4:30 tomorrow, presented by Secretary of State and a guest. Okay. Anything else? That'll do it. Oh. And remind me, Floor Leader, when did you put us back in? All right, Senate will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, March 10th.